No, Eric.
The previous episode of The Walking Dead drew little from its mama source material, but the third episode starts to connect a little bit more in a couple of very interesting ways. If you want to follow along, most of this takes place in Volume 20 during the first half of the arc in the comics. So read along.
Is that the best you can do?
Before we start digging into it, consider this your spoiler warning. I'm Brian Mitchell, and let's dive deep into how Season 8, Episode 3 adapts from panel to screen. Episode 3, titled Monsters, ooh, spooky, was directed by none other than Greg Nicotero and written by Matthew Negrete and Channing Powell. First off, let's rejoin Ezekiel and Carol's mission as it continues in the forest. This eventually connects directly to the comics, but we'll get to that towards the end of the episode. Moving on, we meet up with Eric and Aaron, two little lovebirds, where Eric tells Aaron to leave him behind after being shot in the stomach.
Get back to the fight, and you win this thing.
Although Eric dies almost instantaneously in the comics during issue number 118 when he's shot in the head, he still gets the chance to tell Aaron how much he loves him before he dies in the show. On screen, Aaron eventually returns to get Eric. However, he finds that Eric has turned into a walker as he walks away, leaving Aaron all alone. So again, Eric dies in either medium, but the timelines and specific fashion in which Eric dies are different. Poor Aaron. For the middle portion of the episode, it deviates from the book completely. As we've stated before, Morales in his storyline with Rick isn't in the comics, since Morales doesn't exist within the pages. So Daryl killing Morales only happens on the screen, since Daryl doesn't exist in the comics.
You good?
Rick and Daryl's fight against the Saviors doesn't happen, because again, Daryl doesn't exist in the comics. Morgan and Jesus' fight and drama in regards to their morality doesn't occur, because Morgan is dead by this point in the comics, and Aaron doesn't take baby Gracie to the hilltop either, because she too isn't a person in the comics. Drum roll, please. Now it's time to talk about good old scumbag Greg.
I did not eat those pancakes!
In both the comics and show, Gregory, who had just betrayed his own community, returns to the hilltop and yells for help. But first, let's take a step back.
The hilltop stands with Negan and the Saviors.
We find out that Gregory has sided with the Sanctuary in the comics at the end of issue 115. Rat bastard. At the beginning of issue 116, he was successful in recruiting 8 of his people to the Saviors. When more don't make the switch, Negan kicks Gregory out, and he is forced to walk back to the hilltop. In the show, he can't even recruit the Ocho, or anyone else for that matter, to join the Saviors. So he was also kicked out and stole Father Gabriel's car to return to the hilltop. Continuing with the show, Gregory begs Maggie to let him back into the community. After a lot of pleading, she finally relents.
Shut your damn mouth!
He agrees with Maggie in her point of view of the Saviors. At the top of issue 118, he's allowed back in as well, but the two of them get into a huge fight. Gregory tells Maggie he saved the lives of the Hilltop members. The same argument happens in the show, but with the slight twist that he says he tried to save their lives. So, arguably, Gregory sucks even more in the show, which is pretty hard to do. Yeesh. As issue 118 continues, the two go back and forth until Gregory calls Negan reasonable. Bad idea, Gregory. She swiftly punches Gregory in the face, and when he calls her ma'am, she asserts her authority, but most importantly, her identity. In the comics, she says, "My name is Maggie Green." This happens in the show too, but it was back in Season 7, Episode 5, when Gregory defended Negan before all-out war. Showrunner Scott Gimple took the chance to make a slight script change, but in order to have a huge impact on the story. She says, "My name is
Maggie Ree."
which is a shout out to her murdered husband, Glenn Ree. We miss you, Glenn. After Maggie embarrasses Gregory in the comics, she turns to her own people and encourages them to fight against Negan. At this time in the show, she tells Gregory to shut your damn mouth. While in the comics, she says, "Shut the fuck up before I hit you again." Damn. Maggie also tells her people, "I believe in Rick Grimes." This doesn't happen in the show, and here's where we really deviate from the comics. In the show, Jesus and Tara show up with a massive group of Savior prisoners to hold at the hilltop, and they argue about what to do with them. Although Gregory resists the idea, Maggie allows them to stay. None of this occurs at all in the comics, so all storylines stemming from that belong purely to the show. Back to Ezekiel and Carol. In the final moments of the episode, Ezekiel and his Kingdom fighters get ambushed in a bloody attack from the Saviors. Ezekiel is tackled by his own people for protection, but it looks like his soldiers are shot in the process. This scene is from the comics, as seen towards the end of issue 118. Since the corresponding scene in the show was so brief, we'll save the major comparisons for a future episode. Again, similar to last week, the majority of the scenes from the show didn't derive from the comics, but there are some key similarities. It's interesting to notice and raises a lot of questions in regards to how All Out War will play out.
Can I go?
We'll continue to break down the comparisons between the show and comics all season long, so make sure to stay tuned and let us know in the comments below if we missed anything important. Like this video and subscribe to Skybound. Thanks, folks!